Hello, Peppers. Let's get peppy. I am Chaz Licciardello.
And I am Dr. David Smith. Chaz, I've got a question for you.
Yes, right at the gate.
When a few weeks ago you went to collect your new dog,
yes,
your 8-week-old Whippet,
that's right.
did you say, let's get puppy?
I didn't, but I wish I had.
Missed opportunity, Chaz.
It's the only thing that would make that day finer.
That is very disappointing.
Yes. For those who don't know, we cover American politics.
Yes,
I'm
we
trying
do.
to do intros these days.
Oh, really? Okay.
And this, if you're interested in something we don't cover here on Planet America, which is the TV show that I co-host on the ABC, which was just on the air on Friday night, which is when this podcast comes out, we covered a whole bunch of stuff, some of which we're going to continue here, but most of which I'm not going to repeat myself. But we also roll on a little bit from what we said the week before. Often we come back, and I'd like to start off by cleaning up something I talked about last week. It's not a correction. This is an improvement, some extra information.
Not
some
a
more
correction,
numbers.
an improvement.
No, it's not. It's anything wrong.
I like that.
But it's.
I'm going to write that on students' papers. This isn't a correction. It's more of an improvement.
This is just something which I was saying last week, which was right. I got more numbers.
It's going to be even more right now.
Because you know, there's nothing that I lack more than numbers.
Okay, Chaz.
So I've got some more numbers for you. So student aid.
Right.
And I was throwing a few numbers at you, and I saw a few more numbers which were interesting. I was talking about. I told you before that accurately that the major problems with the amount of student debt are the people who have small loans, not the big loans. The $100,000 loan people, they're not the concerns. They usually have very good degrees from very good universities, and they make a lot of money.
Yeah, but the interest that they end up paying on those loans
that's
is
true.
much, much greater in many cases than the loans themselves.
That would be the case.
What the fuck are they even paying for?
Well,
I mean, why do they have to keep paying?
They're paying to become a dentist.
I get the basic point that you're making, but the student loan industry in the US, even when it's not associated with the predatory for-profit colleges, it's still a pretty predatory thing.
Even their HEC system, because they do have a HEC system, is incredibly complicated. Everything is incredibly complicated. There's no simplicity at all. But I just want to throw some quick numbers.
Sorry for derailing you.
That's okay.
With compassion.
8 million federal student loan borrowers are currently in default.
Right.
The majority of them owe less than $10,000.
That is more than the population of New South Wales.
There you go. But I said that the biggest defaulters, I said the problem was private universities.
Yes.
That is a big problem.
Yes. Although I think we should clarify, it's not just private universities. Like the Harvards and Stanfords of the world.
Sure.
It's the DeVry colleges, the Phoenix universities.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the people who I didn't mention, and this is what I'm going to throw in here, are the people who don't finish their degree.
Right.
Because they are absolutely getting nothing for their degree. Right. And they're paying, and they still have debt.
Yes.
And the numbers I have here, which is really interesting, was there was a study I was reading about.
I like the study I was reading about.
Yes. I didn't read the whole study.
Yeah.
They began repaying their loans in the 2003-2004 school year. Okay?
Right.
Over the next 12 years,
Yes.
this is what the study was of. Over the next 12 years, out of those who eventually defaulted on their loans, 49% of them had dropped out of school.
That's appalling.
So that's your issue, basically. Between your dodgy private colleges and the people who don't finish their degrees, they're the ones who get nothing for it. They have a huge debt.
Yep.
Not necessarily huge as in hundreds of thousands, but even $8,000 or $9,000.
Yeah.
If you don't have a job to pay it with, that's a huge debt.
Yes.
So there's your problem. So I just wanted to point that out. Something which you talked about on the show today. When I say the show, I mean Planet America, which you can watch on iView or on our Facebook page.
Also, feel free not to watch it.
You don't have to. That's okay. This wasn't a great episode. I was about to say it's a great episode.
Okay, you've got the endorsement from Chase himself.
It was funny, actually. We tried to interview both Bill Crystal and Matt Schlapp for
Why?
Well, you want to get both sides of the Never Trump thing, Never Trump and Ever Trump, right? But I had a great question for Matt Schlapp. I was really excited. I'll tell you my question because I didn't get to ask him because Matt Schlapp didn't turn up.
Oh no!
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. That's great, but I would have loved to have heard his answer to one of the questions.
Wasn't this the first day of CPAC?
Yeah.
So is that why he didn't turn up?
Well,
because he decided that CPAC was more important than Planet America.
He's the one who chose the time. I'm not dissing him. He's a busy guy.
He chose the time so that he could stand you up, Chess. This was an alpha move.
So, I'm definitely a beta. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, you've been slapped.
I want to tell you the question because I don't know how to answer, and I'd love to hear it.
What is your question?
Well, the question was to say there's a two-part question. The first part was your website got a warning from Twitter yesterday.
Right.
What was that about? And then he would go on about cancel culture, as you would expect.
Yes.
And then I'd follow that up with, that's interesting because there's a lot of talk about stifling debate on the Conservative side at the moment. Why is it they have 131 speakers, you don't have a single speaker who's anti-Trump?
Got him. So you had the perfect got him, and then he just thwarted you by not bothering to show up.
He's too smart for me and too alpha.
Oh dear! But so you had to talk to Bill Kristol instead.
Oh, John did. I was dealing.
I was
dealing with my dog.
Yeah.
Who was, by the way, very intelligent, I got to say. Not a never Trumper, but very intelligent. So we'll interview him one of these days.
I would far prefer to talk to your dog than Bill Kristol, let alone match slap.
But the reason I brought up our show was because we spoke quite a bit about the reconciliation for minimum wage, which is that's today's breaking news.
Yes,
that the American rescue packages, they call it, the COVID relief bill, the $1.9 trillion bill, that is currently racing through the Senate. It's looking like it's going to be reconciliation, which means they're going to need 50 votes. They won't need any Republicans to get through, but it needs to jump through a whole bunch of hoops.
Yes,
and one of those hoops is that that every single part of it needs to be primarily about the budget. Mm-hmm. And the parliamentarian, who is the umpire in this case, said that it is that the minimum wage regulation to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour is not primarily about the budget. It's primarily about raising people's wages. Yes. Which is fair enough.
It's quite hard to argue with that.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so therefore it can't go into reconciliation, which means that they need 60 votes to pass an increase. Now, what I want to just emphasize to people, I have mentioned this in the past, but I want to emphasize it because no one else is emphasizing this, at least that I've seen, and that is that does not mean it's over unless Joe Biden wants it to be over. Because what happens now is the parliamentarian is essentially just an umpire with no authority.
Right.
And the person who has the authority is actually Kamala Harris, the president of the Senate. And she can say, you know what? I deem it to be appropriate for reconciliation. And it doesn't matter how ridiculous that call is. Yeah. She can make it.
That's what the Trump administration would have done.
Yeah. And
that's what Mike Pence would have done in the same situation.
Here's the beauty of it. If she makes that call, you need 60 votes to overrule her.
That's right.
So Manchin and Sinema and whoever has a problem with it, they need to find 8 other Democrats to vote against it to overrule Kamala Harris, which means, assuming they don't get those 8 other Democrats, the minimum wage minimum wage part will still be in the bill. And then Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema are going to have a choice. Are you going to destroy the entire COVID relief bill, or are you going to swallow the minimum wage increase, which is a really tough call for them to make if they want to play hardball. Yes. Right? Now, Joe Biden...
No, they would swallow it, right? They would eat it.
I think they would.
I just don't think Biden's going to do it.
I don't think he will either. I mean, this is a quote that he said to the Democrat governors a couple of days ago. I really want this in there, but it just doesn't look like we can do it because of reconciliation. I'm not going to give up, but right now we have to prepare for this not making it. Now, the fact is he is giving up. Yes, otherwise, he would tell Kamala Harris to make that ruling.
He's not fooling anyone here.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know if Bernie Sanders is going to take that, but because he's the guy in charge of this process, the reconciliation process. But Joe Biden has basically given up on the minimum wage increase.
Yeah, and he forecast that weeks in advance that he was going to give up
really
on
did.
Like he could not have done a better job. Not even Trump forecast as effectively that he was going to dispute the election, as effectively as Biden forecast that he was going to give up on minimum wage.
Well, he first mentioned the reconciliation issue during the primary campaign, like almost 2 years ago. So,
Yes,
so he really has foreshadowed
that. That is farsighted.
To be fair, though, to Joe Biden, he has good...
We are being fair to Joe Biden.
Well, we're being accurate to Joe Biden.
Yeah.
He does have good polling reasons for his opinion. That is this. From
Yes.
Data for Progress, I might add, which is a left-wing polling company.
As the name would suggest.
Yes. They found, interestingly, that 14%... It's interesting that they asked this, actually. 14% of Democrats oppose passing a wage hike through budget reconciliation with the support of only one party. They were very specific with their question.
Jesus. What percentage of people they were asking even knew what that question meant? It's not 14%.
I would like to think they explained what that meant before they asked it.
But
anyway, 14% Democrats opposed it.
If you explain what it means, you prime an answer.
That is true.
No, they wouldn't have explained what it meant. That would have had to be the wording that they would have put in the survey instrument.
There's no way they could have asked them about budget reconciliation and expected an answer.
Well, clearly they got one.
Yes.
This is why I don't trust data that comes from outfits like Data for Progress.
Well, let me just finish the numbers, and then you can continue to say why you don't trust it. The other number, the key here is 14% Democrats oppose passing a wage hike through the budget reconciliation with the support of only one party, but 54% of independents opposed it.
Right.
And they're the people that Joe Biden's going for. Now continue to say why you distrust that.
Because when, their prerogative is getting data on policies like this. The reality is of most policy is that it's not understood by most people.
That is a reality.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not saying that, they did it the best that they could. Like, there's probably no simpler way that you could have put that, and they got the key point in about only supported by one party. They certainly weren't trying to skew the results in favour of their intended outcome, which I'm sure they would have actually wanted a lot more people to say.
Of course they would, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. At the same time, you can't trust it in the sense that you're into Pierre Bourdieu's public opinion does not exist territory in terms of that. The answer to that is basically an artifact of the question.
That reference to the French intellectual is the only thing more alpha than Matt Schlapp standing outside for our interview. Matt Schlapp is intimidated by the use
Bourdieu
of
versus Schlapp. There's an alpha fight we all wish we'd seen.
Do you have anything you want to add about that bill before we move on slightly?
No.
Okay. Well, what I want to move on before we go into a completely different topic, I just want to just say, okay, so we all agree.
Yes.
The minimum wage is not going to pass in its standard form.
We all agree that.
Okay.
Yes.
There are two alternatives on the table.
Yes.
One is proposed by Tom Cotton and Mitt Romney.
Oh God.
Which I'm going to tell you about. Do you know about this?
No.
Okay. All right. This was earlier in the week.
Yep.
They proposed to raise the minimum wage to $10 per hour by 2025. 2026 for small businesses under 20 employees.
By the way, for those wondering, it's what, $7.25?
$7.25 at the moment.
Yep.
Yes, that's right. And this is a big one. This is the big part of it. And to then index that wage to inflation every 2 years from then on, which is massively overdue.
Because that has not been happening. For those of you wondering, this has not been happening for the last 12 years.
They have never indexed the minimum wage for inflation, which is why it keeps on being so rock bottom, because it's hard to pass increases.
Yes.
The Democrats, by the way, in their bill wanted to tie it to median wage growth as well. So they both were on the same path there. The Mitt Romney, Tom Cotton bill keeps the sub minimum of $0 for employees with disabilities. Which I don't know. That's one of those areas I just feel like I'm uninformed because the logic they say is look, who is going to hire someone with Down syndrome if you're paying them exactly the same as you would pay a 25-year-old adult without any disabilities? And like they're saying, if you want these people to be able to work, they need to be able to be paid less. That's the logic.
I.e., Nothing.
Well, no. When you say the sub minimum is zero, that's when you pay them zero. But that means there is no minimum, right? So
You've got a lot more faith in the American employer than I do.
Like I said, I feel I'm uninformed because I feel like this is the kind of thing where you hear it and you go, well, that is a bunch of bullshit. You are just legalizing the exploitation of people with Down syndrome.
But usually, Chaz, when you hear that in the American context, that's exactly what's going on.
Maybe. Anyway, I'll just say that they're keeping that.
Yep.
They want to keep that. The Democrats do not.
Okay.
One thing which they also want to keep is a youth minimum, which at the moment, would you like to guess what the youth minimum wage is at the moment?
My God.
$7.25 is the normal minimum wage.
One piece of candy.
No. It's $4.25 an hour. They want to increase it to $6 an hour. So that's what they're offering.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there's a bit of take as well, which is they would require all employers to use the E-Verify program.
Okay.
Make it compulsory.
Yes.
To screen out illegal. And you can see the logic. The logic is we are going to increase the wage, but it's not going to be an artificial increase because we're going to reduce the supply of labour by getting rid of illegal immigrants.
Now, to get to another important category, was there anything in there about tipped workers? Okay.
No,
well, that's just shit.
Yeah.
Because tipped workers, their minimum wage is $2.
$2.20 maybe $2.15, something like that. Yeah, it's not much.
No.
But look, this will be a starting point for negotiation, obviously.
Right.
Like personally.
Yeah, I'm worried that the Joe Biden school of negotiation is
negotiate down.
Yeah.
It's actually one making $9 an hour. Anyway, that's one alternative that is out there.
Yes.
Remembering there is no other game in town at the moment because Joe Biden has given up on the minimum wage increase. The other proposal is from Josh Hawley.
Oh, no.
See, you can tell how popular the minimum wage increase is. The fact that Tom Cotton's got one plan and Josh Hawley's got another.
Yes.
So I'm going to do draw a lot of analogies to my dog because I'm besotted with my dog. But this reminds me of my dog. Just before it does a big turd, it does little circles, sniffing around the area. In this case, the big turd is the presidential campaign of Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley. They're sniffing around. Okay, Josh Hawley's proposal is this. For the next 3 years, workers making less than $16.50 an hour, and that will rise with inflation, would receive a refundable tax credit worth one half of the difference between their hourly wages and $16.50, up to 40 hours a week. So,
see, that is not only bad, it's so convoluted that it could have come out of a Democratic Party policy shop.
I'll tell you what's wrong with it.
Way to go, Josh. Worst of every world.
Even from an economic rationalist point of view, there's a problem here, which I'll get to in a second. So just to give you an example, someone making $10 an hour would get a tax credit worth $3.25 an hour.
Yes.
Okay, and like we always say, when there's a tax credit, that means you don't get it till the end of the year. So that's bullshit for a start, all right? Because people who are on minimum wage...
You only need to eat once a year.
Yeah, they need the money now. So, but let's leave that aside. Let's say they paid it monthly or whatever. They worked that out. Here's the thing. Since it's a tax credit, that means when you're getting, say, $1 an hour raise, you're losing 50 cents an hour from the tax credit because it's a tax credit. It's not...
This is just the best policy ever, isn't it?
And furthermore, you're losing government benefits.
They are going to love this in Missouri.
So you'd have a huge marginal tax rate.
Oh my God!
If you as you increase your wage, right? Now, I actually I'm not going to pretend it's my idea. I saw someone else mention this online, and they're right. There is an easy way to make this less shit. Still complicated, but less shit, which is you actually pay the employer the tax credit.
Yeah.
And so from the employee's point of view, they're just getting...
Right.
They're basically just getting half the difference between their wage and $16.50. So that would make it a lot better. Still very convoluted. Would you?
So that's when your dog has done it on the kitchen floor rather than the carpet.
Sadly, I know all about that at the moment. So would you consider either of those plans or anything near those plans?
Well, I mean, the Cotton-Romney plan is better.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd make it.
But I'm obviously not a fan of it. Let us just again remind Peppers of the fact that Tom Cotton and Josh Hawley are going to spend the next 2 or possibly 3 years trying to run presidential campaigns for 2024, but without actually getting in just hoping, praying that Trump will decide not to run.
Yes.
And Trump, out of sheer spite, is going to wait till the last minute. Say no, I'm not running.
Yeah, that is absolutely true. That is correct. You cannot bear in mind enough that everything they say is about the 2024 presidential campaign.
The incredibly awkward 2024 presidential campaign, which they are not allowed to start until Trump officially announces that he's not running.
When he does, if Trump does announce he's not running, I stand by what I said last week, which is DeSantis will just go straight past them, straight past those two. Do you know this week DeSantis lowered the flags of Florida for Rush Limbaugh? I'm telling you, this guy knows what he's doing. Anyway.
Clearly he heard our touching obituary on PEP.
Anyway, okay, that's enough of that.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the other big story today, which we talked a little bit about on Plain America, but let's talk much more about now.
Yes.
Is appointments.
Yes.
In particular, some ill-fated, some not so ill-fated.
Going on here, yes.
Yeah, which one are you most interested in to begin?
Look, the one that I am most interested in is Deb Haaland.
Okay, let's
as Secretary of the Interior. But actually, no, I want to leave that to a little bit later because I want to talk a lot more about the Department of the Interior.
Okay, well, why don't we start with Neera Tanden?
Yeah, so while we're talking appointment gossip, let's talk Neera Tanden.
Okay, all right. So just for those who don't know, Neera Tanden has been nominated for the directorship of the OMB, the Office of Management Budget, which is basically, it's a number cruncher for the president. So it's weird that the Senate has approval. I was trying to read up about this, why exactly the Senate doesn't approve. It's basically, I don't want to go into too much detail, but basically there was a fight that the Congress had with Richard Nixon in 1973. All bad things come from Richard Nixon, and basically it was the only way they could win the fight was to give a rule with a veto-proof majority to make OMB. So
that's how OMB came about, because of a shirtless brawl between Nixon and Congress.
Yeah, but anyway, so Neera Tanden now she was the head of a sort of moderate left think tank, sort of very establishment left think tank.
I always forget the name of
Center for American Progress.
Center for American Progress.
And she also
the name just sort of describes.
She's also a policy
policy
guru for Hillary Clinton.
Yes. And
she basically spent the best part of 4 years fighting with Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
And his people, in particular his people.
Yes, yeah.
And so, anyway, but that's not her problem at the moment. Her problem at the moment is, because Bernie Sanders has kind of forgiven her gruffly, like Bernie Sanders does.
Yeah.
But, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes.
But her problem at the moment is the fact that she also, on the way through, has been sledging every single Republican senator who is going to be weighing in on her confirmation right now. She deleted some tweets that she was worried about. Do you know how many tweets she deleted?
How many?
She deleted over 1,000 tweets. That's how prolifically she has sledged the people who are sitting in judgment of her. And now that they are not very impressed with her.
Oh, dear.
Now the Democrats are saying, it's because you're sexist and because you're racist, which I got to say seems quite cynical to me for a number of reasons.
Well, look, both things can be true.
They can both be true. That is correct.
Yeah.
But I did mention this on the show, but it's like the Democrats, almost every single person they nominate is either a woman or a racial minority.
Yes.
And then when there's opposition, they go, it's because you're against women and racial minorities. And we go, well, it's got to be possible to oppose someone from a racial minority or from the female gender who isn't. That isn't for bigotry reasons, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And Neera Tanden is pretty opposable.
I think she is.
Yeah.
But anyway, there's still a lot of bullshit. There's a lot of bullshit going around about her.
And there are some double standards around, like
Rich Grenell.
Yes. Yeah. And I mean, in general, in the confirmation process, white men haven't had nearly as rough a ride as Neera Tanden or Deb Haaland have had. Yeah.
This is a bit of bullshit from Joe Manchin, who has voted. He says he's going to vote against her.
Yeah.
Quote, as I have said before, we must take meaningful steps to end the political division and dysfunction that pervades our politics. At a time of grave crisis, it is more important than ever that we chart a new bipartisan course that helps address the many serious challenges our nation is facing. Who would have thought, if you stop Neera Tanden being OMB, that will chart a new bipartisan course that helps address the many serious challenges our nation is facing?
This is just the really funny thing about this is, like, Neera Tanden is basically, as important as she is in certain circles, she's basically unknown to the rest of the country. She is known to people who are on Twitter.
Yeah.
She is one of the more online
that is true.
Nominations
that is true, yes.
that we've seen. And, I mean, as far as the deleted tweets thing goes.
1,000 deleted tweets.
Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene has escaped any kind of discipline from the Republican Party by saying, oh, yeah, all of those tweets, that was before I became a member of Congress.
But that's because she's a Republican. If she was a Democrat, I think the Republicans might have voted differently.
Anyway, I feel
her tweets.
I feel even pointing out the double standard is falling into some kind of
that is true.
Trap.
That's true. Let me just finish setting up. And that is to say, basically, this is, since Manchin is no, they need a Republican to say yes.
Yes.
Almost all the Republicans have said no, except for Lisa Murkowski. This is what she has said. Quote, I don't think that that's a model that we want to set for anybody, whether it's a nominee. This is talking about the tweets. That we want to set for anybody, whether it's a nominee, whether it's a president, or whether it's a senator. So I'd like us to all to cool that. Manu Raju asked her if the tweet would affect her vote. She said, I suggested to because they showed her the tweet about her. And then they said, is that going to affect your vote? And she said, I suggested to the White House that my colleagues were being very critical of the statements, and rightly so. Yeah. And I think some of the statements were clearly over the top.
Yeah, like calling Susan Collins the worst.
Oh, that's so bad.
Like, Susan Collins isn't great, but she's clearly not the worst.
No, she's not the worst, but I feel like
she's in the same Senate as Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz.
I feel like there's more vociferous things said on Twitter than the worst.
Yes.
Anyway, and McCaskey said, we've gotten kind of numb to derogatory tweets, but we shouldn't. So anyway, that's not saying positive.
Yeah.
One more thing is the Homeland Security Committee pulled her Tanden's vote yesterday. Mm-hmm. There is a person on the Manchin is not on the Homeland Security Committee.
No, God, you would not put Manchin there.
So who is? That caused them to pull the vote, which you normally do when you don't have the numbers.
Yes.
I'll tell you who is. Kirsten Sinema, who hasn't said a word, who's been deadly quiet, and who I personally think is going to cause more problems to Democrats over the next few years than Joe Manchin will.
Yes.
So I reckon she's opposed to
I agree, because Joe Manchin he's fairly open about his general sort of attitude and approach towards politics. Sinema really keeps her powder dry.
She does. And also, Joe Manchin likes to preen, but the bottom line is he's usually there when you need the vote.
Yes. Sinema, who knows?
Yeah. So she seems to pride her independence more than anything else.
Yes.
Anyway, okay, so that's where we're at.
Yes.
So and they may need 2 votes from Republicans, and it looks like they're struggling to get 1.
I don't think they'll get any.
All right, so take it from there.
Well, so I was kind of the name Neera Tanden is one that I hadn't thought about for a few years. And I've got to say, when this controversy popped up and Republicans getting upset about her tweets, my initial response was, why? She hates the left more than you do. Because, what Neera Tanden was famous for, and, once again, undoubtedly very accomplished, very well regarded in centrist democratic policy circles. But what she was famous for was Twitter fights with the Sanders side.
Well, yeah, with Rose Twitter, they call it.
Yeah. Especially during the 2016 primaries.
Yeah, when she turned up in Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yes. And
Podesta's emails.
She did. She did turn up in John Podesta's emails. Who was it she said she hated?
Everyone?
I can't remember, but yes. One of the things that I remember most, and once again, this is very sort of inside baseball, but it was when a blogger called Matt Brunig, who blogged for a much smaller think tank called Demos, got into it with Joan Walsh and Neera Tanden online. Now, So Matt Bruenig is respected in left-wing policy circles, but also known to have this very abrasive Twitter style. And I've got to say, I question anyone's use of time who thinks it's a good idea to get into it online with Joan Walsh. So what started as an argument about, Joan Walsh saying that the Sanders movement is this white male-led movement that is disrespecting a movement of women and people of colour, which was her characterisation, accurately or not, of the Clinton side. Bruenig weighs in with, no, you just hate young people. Tandon ill-advisedly got into this stoush, leading Bruenig to claim that she was a supporter of the 1996 welfare reform bill. Now, at this point in 96, Neera Tandon was still a law student, but she already was in the Clinton orbit at that point, but she didn't join Bill Clinton's team until 1998. So this was probably a little bit unfair from Bruenig, especially when he then sort of personally accused Neera Tandon of cutting off his mother's welfare.
Okay.
But Neera Tandon did not cover herself in glory during this episode at all. And, when Matt Bruenig got fired, she claims she didn't have anything to do with it.
Ooh.
I got to say, I kind of agree with Glenn Greenwald about the fact that it is highly unlikely that the head of this very powerful think tank had nothing to do with Matt Bruenig getting fired.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Anyway, but all of this is extreme inside baseball, right? Who gives a fuck about this? One of the things I'm interested in is actually how little pushback she's getting from the left of the Democratic Party at this point. Now, Sanders did grill her in the confirmation about the kinds of fees that she gets from corporations when she speaks. But I mean, that's a pretty standard complaint that you can make about probably quite a lot of Biden's nominees. It was clear that this wasn't something that was going to jeopardise, his vote.
Well, it's like we said last week. The left are playing very, very nice.
And I suppose that's my overall takeaway from this. This is actually a barometer of how accommodating the left is being at the moment, that they're not putting up any objection to Tandon. She's getting it all from the right in this really sort of overblown criticism. I think that the left has got far more valid complaints about her than the right.
Than Susan Collins being called the worst?
Yes. Than the right does. Yeah. But anyway.
The one thing which I'm finding interesting about this, telling about this, which is also inside baseball but could have repercussions, is we've been led to believe that essentially the reason she's there is because she's Ron Klain's buddy. Ron Klain is Biden's chief of staff.
Yes.
And he seems to be a very powerful, important chief of staff.
Yes.
We've talked before about the fact that Ron Klain seems to be a very competent person. But the fact that basically from the second her name was floated, not officially nominated, just floated back in November, all the Republicans said no. And at that point in time, that they had the Senate majority.
Yeah.
And they just said no. Like all of them was going, no way.
And this shows you how online everyone is. Like, why do they care?
Yeah.
Because of Twitter.
Well, politicians are very online. But yeah, you'd think once they heard that, you'd go, okay, well, let's just try someone else.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter. No harm, no foul.
Yeah.
But no, he just kept on charging. And 2 months later, 2.5 months later, he's still charging.
Yeah.
At no point in time does it look like she's going to get through.
No.
And he's still going. He's undoubtedly driving this racist, sexist stuff, like just trying anything he can to try and just to push her through. And you go, well, this guy, he's a real hard charger. And the Democrats haven't had a real hard charger like this before. And it's going to be interesting to see what he does over the next 2 years, I think. Because if this is an indication of his unwillingness to either A, give up or B, confront reality when he's lost, then Biden's going to have some stoushes.
Jesus.
over the next 18 months.
Burning your political capital on this.
Yeah. Anyway, I just flagged that.
Thing is, if she doesn't get confirmed, she's going to have a great job in the White House.
Oh, yeah. She'll have a non-confirmed position for sure.
Yeah, like it's not like this is going
to.
It's not like this is going to ruin Neera Tandon.
She'll be okay.
They should have given up a long time ago.
Tell us about Deb Haaland.
Yeah, now this is extremely interesting. So Deb Haaland who is an enrolled member of the Pueblo people of New Mexico. If she is confirmed, and it looks like she probably will be, albeit probably along a party line vote, will, as Secretary of the Interior, she will be the first Native American member of cabinet ever.
Which is important.
Is incredibly important. It's also worth keeping in mind. So she was elected to Congress 2 years ago as one of the two first Native American women ever elected to Congress.
Absolutely. And this is not a situation where you go, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a black Secretary of State or something? You just go, because it's great to have diversity generally.
Yeah.
In this case, this is the portfolio that deals with the tribes.
Absolutely, yes. So the Bureau of Indian Affairs is part of the Department of Interior. Bureau of Indian Affairs is older than the Department of Interior. Department of Interior was founded in 1849. Bureau of Indian Affairs was founded in the 1820s. Needless to say, both organisations have historically been extremely hostile to Native Americans. Right? The aim, whether stated or not, was to contain them and prepare for them to die, whether that was by active extermination or out of a belief that Native Americans would just die off. So these are historically hostile organisations to Native Americans, where that situation did not change at all really until the 1930s, until the Indian Reorganization Act of 1934, which did actually acknowledge native title to some extent and which created mechanisms for making native title very real. Mechanisms which always should have been there because the United States government signed all of these treaties with Native American groups, but in effect, Native American land was just held by the federal government. But, so Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 created possibilities for native title and for political empowerment, but it's been an incredibly slow and painful process with as many steps back as there have been steps forward. So, yes, this would be incredibly significant. There have been Native American directors of the Bureau of Indian Affairs before. In fact, the Assistant Secretary Indian Affairs has been Native American, I think, since 1977. But this is a lot more significant. This is the actual Secretary of the Interior. Now, this position, as important as the Indian Affairs portfolio is within it, though, it's about a lot more than that. So, Department of the Interior was set up to manage federal land. And so it happened during that period of American expansion westward. Sorry, those of you who are listening to this can't see my hand sweeping to the left. But westward expansion, there was a lot of new federal land being created. That's what this department was created for. According to its Wikipedia page, it is sometimes humorously referred to as the Department of Everything Else because of its range of responsibilities. So
it's very funny.
Yeah, it's hilarious wiki humor. I hope that gets into Richard Cooke's forthcoming book about Wikipedia. So national parks, Bureau of Land Management is part of it. There's all kinds of things going on in the Department of the Interior,
like fracking.
Yes. And I mean, this is the thing. Yeah. Basically, it's the Department of Interior that makes a lot of major decisions about whether mineral extraction is going to be allowed on public land. Now, by the way, 1/5 of land in the United States is owned by the federal government. It's run by the federal government. And you might have noticed during Deb Haaland's confirmation, a lot of legislators from Western states popping up. I mean, in many ways, the Department of the Interior is the Department of the West, as it always has been. So Alaska, that's more than 60% federal land. Oregon is more than 50% federal land.
New Mexico, where she's from.
Yes.
Yep.
I'm not quite sure what the percentage is.
It's a lot.
But it's high. Idaho and Utah are both more than 60% federal land. Do you know the winner, though? The state with the most federal land in it?
Wyoming?
It's actually Nevada. More than 85%.
Wow.
federal land. But even California is 46% federal land, right? So the West is just covered with federal land. Some of it's national parks, some of it's other stuff. And how this land gets used is an extremely big issue in the West. You may remember the Cliven Bundy clan in Nevada, who accumulated tens of millions of dollars of fines for letting their cattle just graze on federal land. That ended in armed standoff. Some of the same clowns took over a bird sanctuary in Oregon. If you're wondering why...
That bird sanctuary had it coming.
If you're wondering why you choose a bird sanctuary, it's because of the symbolic importance and the real material importance of the Department of Interior in the Western states. Now, what has happened with the Department of Interior is it's the department where, it's so often out of public view. But if you watch what's going on, every time a Democrat comes in, one of the first things they do is reverse a bunch of Republican Department of Interior stuff. Republicans do the exact opposite every time they come in, right? So every time you see a Democrat come in, you will see national parks expand, new limitations are put on what you can do on federal land. When Republicans come in, national parks are contracted again, a whole bunch of new mining leases are given out. Some examples, so, the first thing that Ryan Zinke, who was Trump's Secretary of the Interior, did was to reverse one of the last things the Obama administration did, which was to ban lead bullets in national parks. Zinke said, no, American families should be able to hunt, on public land. Hunting should not be the preserve of wealthy landowners.
Where does Deb Haaland stand on that?
I don't know, but I'm going to... Given that she wants to preserve grizzly bears in perpetuity, I'm guessing it's a far more pro-animal point of view. Some other example, in the George W. Bush administration, where the Inspector General of the Department of the Interior described it under the George W. Bush administration as he said, literally anything short of crime went. Bush, I'm not sure, he had a couple of secretaries of the Interior, but I think it was the second one, legalised both snowmobiles and concealed weapons in national parks. So big philosophical differences about what you are supposed to do with public land. I mean, there have been some real pieces of shit as Secretary of the Interior. My favourite, I've mentioned him before, was Ronald Reagan's first Secretary of the Interior, James G. Watt. Now... Yes, you have. A lot of stuff is attributed to him that he never actually did or said, because he was a Pentecostal Christian, a member of the Assemblies of God. And it's sometimes attributed to him that he said, when the last tree falls, Jesus will return. Okay, he never said that. But you don't need that made-up quote about him. I mean, he had to resign because he described his staff at the Department of the Interior. When someone asked him about affirmative action, he said, we've got a black, a woman, 2 Jews and a cripple, and we've got talent. That's why he had to resign. He also, one of the last things he did was to ban the Beach Boys from playing on the National Mall. So National Mall in Washington is the responsibility of the National Park Service.
Were they too radical?
He didn't want that drugs and Satanism,
that noise,
everything else that comes along with rock and roll. The massive irony, of course, being that rock and roll is basically secularized Pentecostalism. But James G. Watt was not one of the hip Pentecostals. He's one of the square Pentecostals. So, yeah, basically Republicans, when they get control of the government, they just find the worst person that they can to put in there. So Ryan Zinke, this was the man who insisted that the flag of the Secretary of the Interior be flown above the office in Washington, D.C. whenever he was there. That's unknown in Washington outside of the presidency that you do that. Ryan Zinke, who, of all of the grifters in the Trump administration, was just one of the very worst. he eventually had to step down because of a dodgy land deal that he did with Halliburton in his own hometown while he was Secretary of the Interior, i.e. in charge of the land that was the subject of the dodgy land deal. Anyway, this brings us to
Deb Haaland.
Yes. Who has been raked over the coals by Republicans. At the moment, it's not looking like she will get a single Republican vote, once again with the possible exception of Lisa Murkowski. Okay, and that's partly because Don Young, who is Alaska's congressman, seems to have a very good relationship with Deb Haaland. Actually, a couple of Republicans do. Tom Cole from Oklahoma, who's a member of the Chickasaw Nation, also gets on well with Deb Haaland. But Haaland was asked some question, which she dealt with quite effectively by saying, neither Joe Biden nor I thinks that fossil fuels are going to disappear overnight. And Lisa Murkowski said, well, that shows that she understands the concerns of Western states. Yeah. I mean, she just made a factually true statement. But yeah, anyway.
But the thing
but a lot of Republicans are not happy with her in the slightest.
Yeah, I assume that's related to the I mentioned this on the show. The pledge that she made as part of her campaign to end all fracking. I imagine that was probably related.
Yes. But it's not even that. So Stephen Daines from Montana is really upset the one she said Republicans don't believe in science. This is a man who's on the record as saying that global warming can't be attributed to human action.
Right. Yes.
Mike Lee, we're talking about one of these controversial national monuments. So Bear Ears National Monument, which was expanded by the Obama administration and then shrunk by 85% by the Trump administration. If Haaland becomes Secretary of the Interior, she will expand it again. And Mike Lee said, well, I think that you've got to take into account the people who've got some connection with the land. He was not talking about Native Americans. He was talking about mining companies. He said stakeholders, people who might have some connection with the land. And I mean, it really comes back to this attitude that unless you're using the land for extractive purposes, you're not actually using it and you forfeit it, which, I mean, that is the sort of philosophical justification for the abuse and extermination of Indigenous peoples worldwide when they even bothered to get an excuse for what they were doing. It's always along these lines of they're not actually using the land. We can get a lot more out of the land than they can.
The thing I don't understand about the Republican objections. Sorry, you keep going and then I'll jump in.
No,
I was going to say that the thing I don't understand is that, as you accurately mentioned, there's basically a whole bunch of Democrat principles and a whole bunch of Republican principles.
Yes.
And they just swap administration by administration.
Yes.
Whoever takes the role of Secretary of Interior is going to piss off the Republicans for all the same reasons, whoever it is.
Yes.
Right? The difference is that Haaland might actually make some progress in a non-political area that they don't normally argue about, which is the details of the tribes.
Yes.
And so the way I see it is she is a standard Democrat plus, and that plus is really important.
Yes.
And the stuff which they're worried about is all the standard Democrat, and they're never going to find a Secretary for the Interior who doesn't piss them off about those things.
Yes.
So why would they bother? Oh, yeah, that's the way I see it. But anyway, but go on.
They can't help themselves. They cannot help themselves is the basic issue. And I think that a lot of them, I mean, not all of them, Don Young, Tom Cole, but a lot of them don't like the symbolism of having a Native American in charge of the Department of Interior, because to them that potentially represents just something completely different from what they believe the Department of the Interior should be for, which is facilitating extraction.
Sure.
This is their worst nightmare, that someone with a Native American perspective would actually be in charge. And, yeah, they're not going to be overtly racist about it. But as I say, you can see hundreds of year-old attitudes in these questions that are being asked, which is, basically, why should you have anything? You don't even use the land. We don't understand, we don't care about your supposed relationship with the land.
You keep on going. Anything else you want to say to Deb Haaland before we move on?
Yes.
Yep.
I want to end with a quote from Vine Deloria, late great Native American scholar, in his book from 1969, Custer Died for Your Sins.
Does it make the book list?
Yeah. Okay. It'll be hard for you to find a copy. But anyway, the understanding of the racial question does not ultimately involve understanding by either blacks or Indians. It involves the white man himself. He must examine his past. He must face the problems he has created within himself and within others. The white man must no longer project his fears and insecurities onto other groups, races, and countries. Before the white man can relate to others, he must forego the pleasure of defining them. The white man must learn to stop viewing history as a plot against himself. That's the last word on that.
For those who aren't watching the video, Dave rather definitively flicked his phone at the end of that. I was going, yeah, take that, he says with his finger. Okay. Sorry. I was going to talk about immigration, but we talked about that at length on the show. If you're interested in my nuanced take on the illegal immigration situation, watch the last 10 minutes.
Chaz is blackmailing the Peppers into watching his TV show.
Well, I just don't want to waste 15 minutes. We've only got half an hour left.
Okay.
Suffice to say, this is going to, what I will say is this is going to become a massive issue over the next month or so. Because basically, leaving aside all the bullshit, and there's a lot of bullshit at the moment, the Biden administration is already out of room.
Yes.
To keep illegal immigrants for processing.
Yes.
And they are deporting most of them at the moment. They're going to stop deporting some of them soon. They're already out of room. And at this time of year, there's about half as many illegal immigrants as there usually are by June. America is going to...
By the way, you are mostly talking about asylum claimants.
Yes, I am, yes.
It's a more accurate term than illegal immigrant.
Well, when they... Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. But I'm talking about generally. I'm talking about generally. Like, they all go through the same system.
Yes.
Like, at least they do when it's not a farce.
Yeah.
Right, it's, and come June, America's economy is probably going to be going pretty well. They're probably going to be moving past COVID, and you can see a big crunch coming. So if you're interested in where they're at, watch the show.
Watch the show.
Otherwise, we'll talk about it more another time. We are definitely going to come back to it. Let's go COVID quickly, and then we'll go to Texas.
Okay.
With COVID, it's a big week for vaccines, which I think we should just note. You got Johnson & Johnson's vaccine coming out, and that's big because one thing they never mention in the news coverage of this is that Johnson & Johnson have the facility. They're a big manufacturer. They have facilities to produce 1 billion doses this year.
Yes.
So they are basically the rest of the world as far as vaccines go.
Chaz does not receive any funds or payments in kind from Johnson & Johnson Proprietary Limited.
Oh, man, their baby lotion's fantastic. No. But anyway, so that, and while people are focusing on the 72% effectiveness, that is about whether people get even the tiniest, even asymptomatic case.
Yes.
As far as deaths and hospitalizations go, which is what you care about,
yes.
Zero. So it's an effective vaccine. Okay. Even better news than that, Pfizer have announced this week that they think they can tweak their vaccines every 60 days to take into consideration the variants, which is basically tweaking them as fast as they're developing.
Yeah.
So that's incredible technology right there, which is should be actually acknowledged. There's good technology. And the other thing, which is I feel like there's a lot of whinging going on in America at the moment about vaccine distribution, and it's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than anywhere else. They're just behind the UK, which got a head start on them. Israel is basically a test case for Pfizer.
Yep.
So they've got all the vaccines because they're basically giving Pfizer all their data. It's just like one big trial, Israel, essentially. Then you go America. And they've got more than twice the rate of vaccination at the moment than Europe. Right? And the question I think should be asked is why? And I just want to just cover that just quickly.
Okay.
First of all, so these are the basic reasons why America is, in my view, much faster than Europe. And not just my view, I've read a few articles about this. First of all...
You've read about a few articles about this.
I've read a few articles about this. Okay. In this case, I actually read the articles.
Okay.
First of all, I've talked at length about Operation Warp Speed and that the fact that, in my view, it's the greatest triumph from the Trump administration by a mile. If you're talking about things they achieved, although Operation Warp Speed was always well conceived and it delivered.
Because it's got a net positive of greater than zero.
Well, that makes it the best. Yes. Sure. But yeah, it was a public-private partnership, essentially. Europe went the full European Commission approach. Didn't work quite so well. Number two, the cost was no object with Operation Warp Speed. They just threw billions and billions and billions of dollars at it. And also, we whinged about this at the time.
Yeah, but hang on.
Yeah.
Operation Warp Speed was about vaccine development.
Yeah.
But didn't basically all the vaccines around the world develop at about the same time?
Yeah, they were being funded by Operation Warp Speed.
All of them?
Yeah, when you say all around the world, with the exception of the Russian vaccine,
right?
Which I'm pretty sure. I've pissed on the Russian vaccine a bit, but apparently it's very effective. With the exception of the Russian vaccine, basically every other vaccine was bankrolled by America. Even the Oxford University one had a huge slab of money from America as well.
Okay.
And so America was just throwing money around everywhere, right? But importantly, and this is, in my view, this is kind of problematic, but it does make it faster. They excluded the companies from liability.
Yes.
That were working under their...
That's the devil's bargain.
Yeah, whereas EU said, no. If there's a problem with your vaccine, you're going to get sued.
Yep.
And that obviously affects speed. The US and UK bought millions of doses without knowing whether they were going to work or not.
Yep.
The EU waited. So as an example, in July last year, America ordered 600 million doses of Pfizer.
Yep.
The EU put its order in 4 months later for half as many doses.
Right.
And Europe has more people than America does.
Yes, yeah.
The FDA was faster to approve the vaccines as well.
Yeah. So far, this is reading a lot more like a story of European failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. But I'm just telling you about this. And then
the
the other one, which I don't think gets talked about enough, is Western Europe has Europe in general has a lot more vaccine hesitancy than America does.
Yes, that's true.
So even after the vaccines are there, they're being applied much slower.
That is true.
Like we talk about vaccine hesitancy a lot with America, but Europe, it's bad.
Yes.
I think it's like a third of Western Europe strongly agree that vaccines are safe. That's not much. That's not herd immunity. No. So anyway, I just want to flag that. Although having said that, I saw an interesting graph, which I am going to put up right now for you guys, and I'm going to show Dr. Dave. This is from Civics, their tracking poll about people who are unsure or unwilling to get a vaccine.
Yes.
At the election, white Democrats, about 30% of them were unsure or unwilling to get the vaccine.
Yes.
Black people, Latinos, and white Republicans were at 60%. Look what's happened since then.
Oh, wow.
So black people and Latino people have now dropped down, but to about half that, to about 30%.
Yep.
White Democrats have dropped from 30% down to 10%.
Yes.
White Republicans are still at 60%.
Yeah.
Now that's unsure or unwilling.
Yes.
So they may well be converted.
Yes.
But the fact they haven't budged 8% in the last 2.5 months.
Disturbing.
That's a concern.
Yes.
Because you're not going to get herd immunity without those guys.
No, you are not.
So I just want to flag that. That's on the horizon. I want to issue not a correction, just an improvement. No, this is a correction. This is something where I actually think I might be wrong.
Okay.
Which is about schools. I was really hyping this a bit a few months back, saying I think this is going to be an issue for Joe Biden when schools reopen or when they don't reopen. It's not well, okay. First of all, we're finding there's a bunch of studies, like Brown University has a study at the moment, where they're comparing the rate of COVID spreading in schools versus the general community.
Yes.
For both staff and for students. And like this week, one of their early February study found that the staff in schools were getting COVID at a lower rate than the general community.
Yeah.
Like that, and never mind the students were way less. So you'd think that's the kind of thing that would drive discontent if they're not open. Okay? No. 55%, according to Morning Consult, say schools should not reopen till teachers are vaccinated, which is more conservative than the American government is at the moment. It's more conservative than the teachers' unions are
There
at the
you
moment.
go.
Quinnipiac, 47% of adults believe schools are reopening in their community at about the right pace. 18% think it's happening too quickly. So that's 65% are on the it's okay or slow it down.
Yes.
And 27% say it's not happening quickly enough. That's now.
Yeah.
YouGov, parents and guardians approve of their school district officials handling the pandemic, 54-30. These are massive polls which are against the Republicans.
It's true. Yeah. Once again, okay, even though this is an issue that people might care about.
I think they do care about this one.
It's once again not necessarily an issue they know very much about. So I'm just struck by that question. 54% of Americans approve their school district officials' handling of it. You know what voting is in school district elections in the US? It's about 9%. Okay, these aren't officials that people are closely engaged with. Now,
sure, they're talking about whether it's open or not.
Yeah, people with children would obviously have a very clear idea about what is going on.
As someone with children, I definitely do.
I am just taking those surveys with a bit of a pinch of salt, given that half the population wouldn't actually have a particularly clear idea of what's going on.
Okay. There's one more thing, which is something which I did not realise, which I found this week, which is why I'm issuing this improvement.
Okay.
They have been trialling out vaccinations for kids 12 to 16 since July last year.
Really?
They're going to have them out soon. I'm talking Pfizer here.
Yeah,
and Moderna started in December. So even in the worst case scenario, in the most cautious case scenario, where you're waiting until every single person in that school has been vaccinated, they're not going back to school until September. Like for the next year, they're going to all be vaccinated by then. So I actually don't think this is going to be an issue. So just
okay.
So I'll throw that out.
There you go.
Okay, let's talk Texas because I know you want to talk Texas.
Improvement. Yes.
The first thing I'll just set up a couple of things quickly and then you can take it from there.
Yeah.
First of all, I just want to say, and I know I'm promoting the show a lot at the moment, the Plan America, but just people tell me I never mention the show, so I'm just doing it a few times. I'm so proud that we never mentioned the Ted Cruz controversy once on Plan America.
Oh, good.
Not even once.
Wow.
But I am going to mention it once here. I'm not going to go into detail because I hate that controversy.
Yeah.
But I am going to.
Even I mentioned that on Richard Glover's show.
Well, there you go. You see that you're so distracted by scandal, Dr. Dave. I'm going to mention it in a couple of capacities, but not the actual, not straightforward. Number one, take a guess. This is almost a stats nugget. This is so good. Take a guess how many articles the Washington Post ran on Ted Cruz in the first 3 days of the scandal.
15.
27.
Oh.
27.
27.
Okay.
How many times did Snowflake get mentioned?
I think Snowflake featured in quite a few of them.
Yes.
Yes. That's his dog who was left behind.
His adorable white poodle whose face was pressed up against the glass.
To be looked after by a security guard. Yes, that's right.
Poor Snowflake.
A couple of just random things about the Ted Cruz thing before we just leave that and go to Texas.
Yeah.
First of all, Michael Brennan Doherty had an interesting take on this in the National Review.
He always does. His takes are invariably interesting.
Yeah.
I'm saying that sincerely.
Okay, well, this was interesting. Which was
not interesting in the Rod Dreher way. Those takes are also interesting.
Man, Rod Dreher takes a long.
I
just don't have the time to take in his takes.
Very long, but no, yeah.
Yeah, he speculated that this was the first, in inverted commas, post-Trump Republican scandal. And what he was saying, what he meant by that, I mean, he expressed this in a partisan way.
Yes, yeah.
But just take the concept without the partisanship. I'll just read the quote. There's no theorizing about Russian involvement. There's no performed anxiety about the liberal world order coming under strain. There's not held out as a sign of rising fascism. It's just kicking a Republican when he's down. We're back to that again. And I thought, you know what? He's right.
Yeah.
Like there was no hyperventilating. There was no, this is the end of the world. It's just, he's a goon.
Yes.
Let's mock him.
That guy that everyone hates
Yeah,
has just done something very hateable.
Yeah, and I think he's right. So I just would raise that as a way we're sort of moving on a little bit.
Yes, yeah.
It did actually, interestingly, in the polls, I've looked at a few polls about this. According to YouGov,
How many polls have been done on?
how many do you think? A million. Every story about Ted Cruz last week. It seemed to hurt him amongst Republicans more than anyone else, which was interesting. He went
That's
from
not interesting. No, that is not surprising in the slightest.
No?
How could he possibly go lower with Democrats than he already was?
Well, I'm thinking independents, but
this is like so. What I liken this to is, we're seeing a lot of polls at the moment showing, okay, Donald Trump is unpopular, Marjorie Taylor Greene is unpopular, but Mitch McConnell is really, really unpopular.
Minus 45% the last time I saw.
Why is that? It's because, he was already incredibly unpopular with Democrats and suddenly he lost a bunch of Republican support, whereas Green and Trump haven't lost any Republican support. So, I mean, it's kind of in that realm of, yes, he's been hurt most with Republicans because he actually had some distance to fall.
I mean, what you're saying is definitely accurate. Like with Democrats, he went from 12% to 11% approval. But, I should have got you to guess. But independents, so overall, he went from 34-46 to 30-53. But the Republicans, he went from 68-15 to 60-25. So he had room to fall overall.
Yes, yeah.
But anyway, and just flag that. I just want to raise a sort of philosophical thought about this. Once again, leaving the scandal aside, I don't care about that. But there was, like, a lot of people spoke about, why wasn't Ted Cruz helping out, like, say, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was, or or whatever. I was just thinking to myself, what Ted Cruz is almost like the perfect modern Republican politician, and he's a culture warrior.
Yes.
Culture warriors don't help anyone out.
No,
they complain.
They really don't.
That's what they do. They don't do government.
Yeah.
They don't do community organising.
No.
You got to decide, do you want your politicians to be community organisers?
Yeah.
Or do you want them to be culture warriors?
Yes.
Like, there was no culture war to fight other than to turn up on Fox News and talk about windmills, which Ted Cruz was perfectly capable of doing from Cancun. So just make up your mind before you bitch about what Ted Cruz did, because he's delivering in what his supporters, insofar as they exist, want from him, which is he whinges about cancel culture. That's what he does, from Cancun or from Texas.
Yeah.
So anyway, and finally, I enjoyed this tweet, which I want to read out, even though it's strictly speaking, it doesn't make any sense.
Yes.
Ted Cruz continues to be a trailblazer as he becomes the first Hispanic person to flee from Texas to Mexico because of ICE.
Oh.
The ICE was a good touch. As I said, although strictly speaking, doesn't make sense. Now, let's talk about Texas and ERCOT with real policy now, not bullshit scandal. Go for it, Dave.
ERCOT, for those of you who don't know, is the Electric Reliability Council of Texas.
Yes.
Shouldn't that be electricity? No, I just like the fact it's Electric Reliable Council of Texas because it just really summarizes how absolutely shit it is. Now, okay, obviously you know all the details of the Texas storm at this point, despite the fact that Greg Abbott is now very angrily calling for reform of ERCOT. Greg Abbott was not well prepared for this at all, right? So he told Texas residents it was just going to be a couple of days. Greg Abbott was relying on a meteorologist called Joe Bastardi. Okay, that's if you want to Google that, his surname is spelt like bastard with an I on the end.
Sure.
Joe Bastardi, so he's the meteorologist for the Sean Hannity show. He does Sean Hannity's weather reports, and he's a former amateur bodybuilder. So just be warned, if you Google him, you're going to get some disturbing images. Former amateur bodybuilding champion. Right.
Congratulations.
Now, actually,
Joe.
I don't know if Joe Bastardi gave a particularly off prognosis. It's just kind of funny that he was being consulted. And Joe Bastardi was very early on the bandwagon of, well, this is all because of wind and solar.
Sure.
He said, I liken it to using supplements when I bodybuild. He said the supplements can't be the main meal. He's talking about wind and solar here. Now, wind power is 10% of the electricity generated in Texas. Judging by the photos I've seen online of Joe Bastardi, which I'm never going to forget, I'm guessing supplements were considerably more than 10%
Sure.
of his diet during that period of his
During
life.
winter, it's 7%, which is even
Yeah. So we had this immediate sort of idiocy around, the wind turbines froze. Like, yes, they froze, partly because electricity companies in Texas are not required to provide upkeep for wind turbines. But the reality is,
I'm going to talk about that in a second.
all the thermal plants that are also powered by natural gas froze at the same time. But okay, let's talk history at this point. So Texas, most energy-rich state in the country. Maybe Alaska has more reserve, but Texas
got wind as well. It's got solar as well. It's got the lot.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's got everything. Yeah. Most energy-rich state in the country, and has been for a very long time. So the beginnings of the Texas energy grid actually go all the way back to the 1880s, when the rest of the country was nowhere near getting its shit together. National electrification in the US was, I think, basically completed in 1935 with the Tennessee Valley Authority. Tennessee Valley Authority, by the way, is one of the most fascinating aspects of the New Deal and the whole Roosevelt project, well worth reading about. But yes, it was that formed the national electricity grid. Texas deliberately stayed off it. Right, so there are 3 electricity grids in the US. There is the West grid, the East grid, and there's Texas.
Yes.
And the independence of the Texas electricity grid has been violated a few times, but it's remained pretty kind of sacrosanct, right? And the line, it's always been about getting away from federal regulation. And when in 1999, the massive deregulation that characterizes the Texas energy market now happened, it was done with bipartisan support. So George W. Bush, who was the governor, was the one pushing it, but it had support from both parties. Both of them are on board with this agenda of, we want Texas to remain completely independent from the rest of the country, completely deregulated, because this competition will lead to lower energy prices. Now, I'm sure that it did lead to lower energy prices. Whoa!
Ooh,
maybe
don't
not.
Skip ahead.
Okay.
Do we give you the numbers now?
Yes.
From 2004 to 2019, Texas traditional utilities charged 8% less than national average.
Yep.
Deregulated companies charged 13% more than the national average.
Well.
There you go.
There you go.
Keep on going. So they don't even have that.
Yeah, I just assumed that given that this experiment's been going for 22 years that it must have generated lower price. But no, there you go. The libertarian of all people has proven that wrong.
Libertarian knows his numbers.
Okay. So, but it was, the Wall Street Journal of all outlets said when this, during this crisis, the problem here is electricity companies can make money out of Texas customers, but they are not obliged to provide power to Texas customers. They don't have to have any reserve margin of energy for when there's more expected use of energy, and they don't have to provide upgrades to their facilities. So it is this just completely deregulated wonderland that even the Wall Street Journal sees a problem with, because in other states, energy companies, if they're providing energy, they have to provide it. They are forced to provide it under all circumstances. They are forced to have a reserve margin so that they can provide energy. None of these electricity companies did anything illegal under Texas law, did anything wrong in the eyes of the state of Texas, even though they're calling for reform now. None of them can actually be punished for it. I want to talk a bit about Rick Perry at this point.
Okay, all right. I've got a lot to say about this situation. But
But I just want to mention this because Rick Perry, not surprisingly, came out with the worst possible take about this.
Really?
Yes.
Worse than Lauren Babbitt, who said that, hang on, is it that...
Actually, maybe worst possible is overcooking it.
Lauren Babbitt said that President Biden is, quote, nice and warm in his fossil-fueled White House singing Kumbaya with his environmental extremists while Americans are freezing to death. Worse than that?
She's just a wind-up doll, isn't she? I mean...
Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Or the mayor of Colorado City who said, well, if you can't provide electricity for your damn self, fuck off and die.
That's right. What was his story?
Slight paraphrasing there, but you don't have your own generator. Yeah, don't come crying to me.
Get on your exercise bike.
No, but Rick Perry said, and this wasn't just some random statement. This was a blog post on the website of Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House, said, beware, the radical left is going to use this to force a top-down agenda on Americans. And he said, bear in mind, this is at a moment where people are dying of carbon monoxide poisoning because they're going to their cars, the only source of warmth. This is when 80 people are dead and tens of millions of people are without electricity and have been for a long time. He says... Texans are prepared to go for 3 days without power to keep the federal government out of their business.
Yeah.
Now, okay, first of all, Rick Perry, he was George W. Bush's successor as governor of Texas. He, as governor, actually successfully really got the wind industry up and running in Texas. It had been begun by George W. Bush, but actually Rick Perry was very... heavily behind it. So, you know, he knows that what he's... And, of course, he went on the whole wind power is wrong horse that the Republicans were riding. So he knows that it's all bullshit. But I would also like to point out the single greatest moment in Rick Perry's career, which was in the 2012 Republican primaries in one of the early debates in 2011. Because remember, Rick Perry was considered a likely frontrunner.
Very much so.
Yes.
John Barron predicted that he'd be the president.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I haven't forgotten that. Mind you, I said Marco Rubio at one point in time as well.
Anyway, he's on a stage with the other candidates, including Ron Paul. And remember, at this point, the way to be a Republican candidate in 2012 was just to promise as little actual government as possible. And Rick Perry said, I'm going to abolish 3 departments, commerce, education, and what was the other one? And like he actually turned around to Ron Paul and said, what was the other one? And Ron Paul said, I don't know, but I'm going to abolish 5. Anyway, the other one was energy. And with his unerring political instinct, Trump picked him as Secretary of Energy. Now, interestingly, I mean, Perry was actually one of the least scandal-plagued secretaries in Trump's administration until he had to resign for brokering the Ukraine phone call. For some reason, he was one of the 3 people put in charge of Ukraine policy. I mean, the other 2 actually had something to do with Ukraine. They'd been involved with it, and then it's Rick Perry. And apparently Trump blamed him for letting things get out of hand. So just great stuff from Rick Perry. Outstanding.
I just want to just leave Rick Perry for a second.
Okay.
And just come back to, I'm just conscious about time. That's all. And come back to ERCOT, because there are a couple of things which I feel, I think our listeners are probably across the fact that all the windmill stuff was bullshit.
Yes.
Right. I don't think we need to
relitigate that.
Yeah, relitigate that. Yeah, but there are some things which I don't think they would be so aware it was bullshit because it hasn't been publicised so much.
Yes.
Number one, I think everything you said was correct. I'm going to come back to some of that in a second.
Yes.
But deregulation, I know I'm the libertarian, but deregulation on its own was not necessarily the problem here.
Right.
And I'll tell you why. Why? Because not all of Texas was deregulated.
Really?
Austin and San Antonio.
Oh, those lefty girls. Yes.
They got no retail choice at all. They have only one provider, not deregulated, completely regulated.
Yes, yeah.
And they suffered exactly the same blackouts as everyone else.
Right, yes, yeah.
Okay, so the problem is more than just regulation, which I think you have already hinted at.
Yes, yeah.
Well, you didn't hint, you said it.
Yes.
And I want to go through in more detail what you just described because
Yes.
this is not the first time this has happened.
Yep.
You mentioned history. I want to tell you some history.
Okay.
They had similar storms in 1983, 1989, 2003, 2006, 2008, 2010, and 2011.
Right.
After 2011, when they had more of these storms and widespread blackouts, they said, okay, enough. We've had 3 of these in the last 4 years.
Yep.
Let's deal with it. So the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and the Northern American Electric Reliability Corps undertook a study.
Yes.
This is what they found. This will give you a bit of deja vu, given what you've just been talking about.
Yes.
Quote, the massive amount of generator failures that were experienced raises the question whether it would have been helpful to increase reserve levels going into the event. This action would have brought more units online earlier, might have prevented some of the freezing problems the generators experienced, and could have exposed operational problems in time to implement corrections before the units were needed to meet customer demand. They did nothing. In 2014, the Public Utility Commission of Texas also undertook a study, and they proposed rules to require power plants to...
Public Utility Commission of Texas.
Yes.
PUCOT.
Yes, yes. The rules to require power plants to identify and address weather design limits. That proposal was opposed by the generation companies. And so then they weakened the rules to allow power plants to only address previously known problems, not to identify any new potential weaknesses. In 2019, there was another study commissioned, and it recommended they add resiliency and reliability. This is a Houston study, and they wanted to do it for Houston. They determined that to add resiliency and reliability to the grid and the system would have meant an additional $2.38 per month for every customer. They decided it was too expensive. Another thing, the power prices that we've read somewhat about.
Yes.
About the people being charged thousands of dollars. New York Times had an article about someone who was charged $16,000 for a few days' power from Griddy.
Yep.
People were going, oh my God, what's going on with these 16? I should just explain briefly what is going on there, because it's fucked but rational, which is that Griddy they charge $10 a month flat, and then they charge you wholesale prices as opposed to a fixed price.
Right.
So you're basically gambling that when it's plentiful, you'll pay less.
Jesus.
And then when it goes crazy, you pay more. This is one of those cases when it went crazy. So basically, don't buy wholesale prices.
Jesus Christ.
Just get fixed prices.
How is that even an option?
I know. It's amazing. But anyway, that's the reason for that.
Wow.
Not everyone in Texas is paying $16,000 for their energy or their lack thereof.
Yeah.
It's just the people who chose that particular option, that particular very stupid option. And finally, we haven't talked so much about Ted Cruz being shit, but there's someone else who's shit as well, who's gotten away with it.
Yeah.
And that is Chuck Schumer. And I just want to read you a quote.
Oh, okay.
I want to read you a quote from Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
A super shit quote. The bottom line is Texas thought it could go it alone and built a system that ignored climate change. It was not what's called resilient, and now Texas is paying the price. I hope they learned a lesson. He says.
That's a really shit quote.
That's a really shit quote, because the people who pay for it are not the ones who made the decisions.
Yes.
They're homeless people, and they're people who are living in apartments. And they're
amazed and mystified that Chuck Schumer is in this position of power.
And by the way, if we're talking about the science, the science has not determined that those freezes are because of climate change. The science is very much split about whether climate change is going to lead to more of those freezes or less. We don't know. Chuck Schumer, I'm sure, doesn't fucking know. So, but anyway, I wasn't impressed with that.
All right.
Okay, we're out of time. The last minute squeeze from me. Do you have any last minute squeezes?
Happy Lantern Festival, everyone.
Okay, all right. That's not the kind of thing I'm going to be doing. The last minute squeeze. The last minute squeeze. I want to talk about Republicans for a while, but I don't have the time. So I'm just going to do 2 things that are interesting.
Yes.
One, the censure motion for Richard Burr for impeaching, for voting to convict Trump is very funny. I'm not sure if you've seen this.
No.
This is from his local GOP branch, the Orange County, North Carolina branch.
Yes.
I'm going to read it to you. The Executive Committee of Orange County formally and irrevocably censure U.S. Senator Richard Burr for gross impropriety in the position of trust and honor for disloyalty to President Trump. And it permanently bans Richard Burr from entering the premises of the Orange County GOP.
That is amazing.
He's not allowed on the premises anymore.
Oh, that is great. They will chase him off with guard dogs.
How good's that? And the last thing I want to do is just a little bit of a catch up for one of our favourite members of the show. I don't think you were here when we talked about him, Mike Lindell.
Oh yeah,
from My Pillow.
Yes,
who but he got a cease and desist from Dominion.
Yes,
for a lawsuit, and 5 weeks ago he said, "I want them to sue me." And all he had to do was ignore the cease and desist letter and instead buy an hour-long infomercial of defamation. And now he's been sued for $1.3 billion from Dominion, which is, unfortunately for Mike Lindell, he has almost exactly $1.3 billion. Wow. So unlike, say, Sidney Powell, who's just going to go bankrupt, he is going to lose his shirt.
They are going to take him to the cleaners.
And I'm going to leave you. This was the squeeze. For those who haven't seen it, a lot of you will have, with the disclaimer that ran on his hour-long infomercial of defamation.
Okay.
Have you seen this before?
No, I have not.
It is the funniest thing on earth because One American News Network ran this infomercial, and they put this disclaimer that went before it. It goes for 1:25, but it is so worth it.
Excellent.
Listen to this.
Michael James Lindell has purchased the airtime for the broadcast of this program on One America News Network. Mr. Lindell is the sole author and executive producer of this program and is solely and exclusively responsible for its content. The topic of this broadcast is the 2020 election. OAN has undertaken its own reporting on this topic. This program is not the product of OAN's reporting. The views, opinions, and claims expressed in this program by Mr. Lindell and other guests, presenters, producers, or advertisers are theirs and theirs alone and are not adopted or endorsed by OAN or its owners. In particular, OAN does not adopt or endorse any statements or opinions in this program regarding the following entities or people: U.S. Dominion, Inc., and any related entities. Smartmatic USA Corp., Brian Kemp, Brad Raffensperger, or Gabriel Sterling. Further, the statements and claims expressed in this program are presented at this time as opinions only and are not intended to be taken or interpreted by the viewer as established facts. The results in the 2020 presidential election remain disputed and questioned by millions of Americans who are entitled to hear from all sides in order to help determine what may have happened.
Wow.
So after the lawyers insisted that they run that, Mike Lindell went through with his hour-long infomercial of defamation. Anyway, good luck with the lawsuit, Mikey.
Yep.
See ya, Peppers.
See ya, Peppers. Have a good weekend.